Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military with Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the United States of America, because yesterday Donald Trump made several very important statements about the situation in Ukraine. The situation was obviously very interesting because before Trump made his statements, lots of sources reported that Trump will agree to meet with Putin only if he also holds talks with Zelensky. But during press conference, Trump denied media insinuations. Putin does not need to meet with Zelensky to meet with me. Trump denies media insinuations. Trump said that he does not make contacts between the Russian leader and Zelensky a condition for meeting with Putin. On the ceasefire in Ukraine, Putin must make this decision. The US president also answered the question of whether the ultimatum regarding Russia and Putin remains in force. It will depend on him. Let's see what he says. It will depend on him. Very disappointed. So Trump made his statement, and currently Trump is waiting for this meeting, the historical meeting between the president of the Russian Federation and the president of the United States of America. And most likely this is going to be one of the final meetings between according to and regarding the situation in Ukraine, because if leaders like Putin and Trump meet each other, this means that the situation must be probably at the point when everything will be resolved within months, not years or decades or something like this. And of course now everybody has their own expectations regarding the situation. The sources reported, for example, CNN writes that Ukraine fears the return of Trump to a pro-Russian peace plan that will satisfy Moscow's demands. Zelensky himself is in a panic. He announced a bunch of talks with the European and has already put forward his demands for peace negotiations. Zelensky wants Europe to join this peace process, because if Europe joins this peace process, obviously these peace talks will be prolonged for months, maybe even years, before Europe, the United States of America, Russian Federation and Ukraine will find common things and common sense. Today is a day of many calls and contacts for real progress on the path to peace and guaranteeing Ukraine's independence under any circumstances. Several of my talks are planned already on the schedule. A conversation with Merz, the Chancellor of Germany. The Russian Federation, Putin and Russian authorities have their own expectations regarding talks and regarding final agreement. Putin, of course, he wants peace, but with all his geopolitical goals. According to the publication analysis, according to the New York Times, Vladimir Putin's goal is to conclude a peace agreement that will allow him to achieve his geopolitical objectives, securing all of Russia's interests. The most important of them are preventing Ukraine from joining NATO and stopping future expansion of the alliance, limiting Ukraine's military potential, and of course creating a basis for more Moscow-friendly government in Kiev. And this is probably the most important paragraph for Zelensky, because as everybody understands right now, Zelensky is not going to leave his position as a president of Ukraine. It seems that he is going to rule Ukraine for ages, not for just another or second term. It seems that he will try to do everything he can with the purpose to stay in power for as long as possible, 10, 20 or 30 years. And telling the truth, he has possibilities for this, and most likely soon we're going to start watching how he's acting in this direction. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. At the same time, during all these talks and rumors about talks during the next week, the Russian Federation continues escalation. We continue receiving updates from the Kherson direction. More and more sources are paying attention to this area. Russia cuts off Kherson, forcing Kiev to evacuate the population from the island. That was stated by the CNN. Russia is once again trying to capture Kherson, concentrating strikes on key infrastructure facilities and transport roads. If you remember, we discussed the situation yesterday. According to information we have, the Russians are about to destroy every single road that connects the island, the Ostrov, this with the main part of the city of Kherson, and obviously when it happens, the Russians will land infantry, and most likely the Russians will try to land infantry right before another round of talks between Russia and the United States of America. Furthermore, today pro-Russian resources are spreading this information. A new batch of boats has arrived at the disposal of the Dnieper group of forces. The Russians are trying to show the Western countries and Ukraine itself that they're ready to cross the river of Dnieper and to take under complete control, maybe not the entire city of Kherson, but at least the most southern part, the micro district by the name of Ostrov. And obviously this might be a very powerful media attack on the Ukrainians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 12 hours, we got a lot of very important changes on the ground. So this is the city of Pokrovsk, and as you can see, we have a lots of changes and they are very important. Pro-Ukrainian resources published a very interesting video, and we have found at least 3 geolocations from this video. We will not watch this video because there are lots of casualties, too many violence, lots of FPV drone attacks and so on. But during this video that you can find on the map, the Russian soldiers of sabotage and reconnaissance group were moving in the central part of the city of Pokrovsk. One of the place where a Russian soldier was moving was discovered in this area. Another point of Russian presence was discovered in this point, and another Ukrainian FPV drone attack was discovered in this area. So based on this video, as you can see, we have adjusted the map mainly in the central part of the city of Pokrovsk. So let's compare the map between the dates. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 7th of August of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 8th of August. The Russians improved their position significantly, and according to this, we see what the Russians are tasked for. We understand that most likely the Russians are trying to outflank the citadel, the Pokrovsk citadel, which is located in the most southern part of the city. We are talking about this area. The Russians can't attack this territory in front because this way they will suffer huge losses. The Ukrainians created a real stronghold, probably the most powerful stronghold since the beginning of the special military operation. The stronghold as we used to see stronghold in the area of the city of Ugledar. So that is why the Russians made a decision to outflank the citadel from the north by moving further in the eastern direction with the purpose to cut the street of Shosseina. So they are trying to cut this area. If the Russians are able to establish complete control, let's say, over this territory, then the Russians will be able to cut the southern citadel from supply and support, and this will force either Ukrainians to fall back or they will stay there forever. At the same time, don't forget that these days and those days we got lots of reports about additional progress on the ground made by the Russian forces along the railways in the direction of the settlements of Chinchina, Novopavlovka and Gnatovka. Furthermore, the settlement of Chinchina was taken by the Russians according to several pro-Russian resources. Furthermore, the clashes are taking place currently in the most western part of Novopavlovka. So we see that the Russians are taking the southern citadel in Pinsk. If they can do this, then this will going to be the beginning of complete collapse of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, and then it's just going to be a matter of time, probably of several weeks or several months before the Russians finish the battle for this territory. Furthermore, according to neutral mappers, by the morning of the 8th of August of 2025, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Lyantovichi. Now we are waiting for another Ministry of Defense report regarding this matter. Furthermore, the Russians continue improving their positions to the northeast of the city of Pokrovsk and the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, and according to different sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. First of all, and the most important, the Russians by the morning of the 8th of August of 2025 secured the mine of Krasnolimanska. So this stronghold was taken by the Russians, and the Russians managed to move even further in the western direction, and currently the clashes are taking place for the mine of Rodinska. If Russians take this mine under complete control as well, then Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back within several weeks from the village of Rodinska further in the western direction, and this is going to be another, let's say, decisive victory for the Russians in the battle for the Pokrovsk agglomeration. So we are waiting for additional updates, of course, and the most important, we are waiting for geolocations that can confirm Russian control over the Shakhta, over the mine of Krasnolimanska. At the same time, the sources reported that the Russians improved their positions in the area of Dorozhny, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this area as well. This is also a very important facility that the Russians can use for concentration of their troops for further offensive in the northwestern direction. And today we got a very interesting article published from the settlement of Zolotoy Kolodez. Rumors say a Russian sabotage reconnaissance group entered the outskirts of Zolotoy Kolodez near Dobropolye yesterday. So this is the village, and if we calculate the distance between possible edge position of the armored force of the Russian Federation and this village of Zolotoy Kolodez itself is around, as you can see, 11 kilometers. So which means that the Russians operate much deeper that we can see right now according to this map, not just the area of contested area or the gray zone, the areas where the Russians operate with their sabotage and reconnaissance group. We see that the Russians managed to answer much deeper, much more deeper than probably we can find in information in the open source or in the internet. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Konstantinovka. During the previous 12 hours, the Russians attacked the settlement of Drushkovka. As you can see, several explosions took place in the area of the railway station. Most likely the Ukrainians tried to bring fresh forces or fresh arms for the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. The Russians discovered and destroyed this position or another facility that Ukrainians use for military purposes. At the same time, the Russians are finishing the battle for the southeastern part of the Kliban-Byksky pocket. Very interesting situation. I would like to remind you that just yesterday we got a video where we can see how the Russians were attacking and clearing the settlement of Katerinovka. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian resources. Today several pro-Russian resources reported that the village of Katerinovka is the area of a kill zone. It's very difficult both for the Russians and for the Ukrainians to move and to move from one side to another on the territory of the settlement, so we can't say that the Russians have strong control over the territory. Anyway, according to information we have, the Russians took under control dense network of the fortifications along 0522 road, and this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday. I would like to remind you that yesterday several pro-Russian resources reported about the same. So currently we are about 800% sure that the Russians create a cauldron for the Ukrainians on this territory. Ukrainians have just one option for evacuation from the settlement of Kliban-Byk along this forest and along Kliban-Byksky water reservoir, probably until this lake station, and then using boats, most likely Ukrainians are transferring themselves from the southern part of reservoir to the northern part. So we can start counting probably not even days but even hours before the Kliban-Byksky pocket falls in Russian hands. So when talking about Ukraine, probably we're finished with the most important updates. And today I would like to point your attention to another interesting situation. Today we have the president of Azerbaijan and the prime minister of Armenia on the territory of Washington. And according to Russian resources, at least the Russians call the situation exactly like this. Today the president of Azerbaijan will accept the capitulation of the Prime Minister of Pashinyan of Armenia. So the war started in between Azerbaijan and Armenia right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and now we see that the states are trying to finalize the situation, to sign peace agreement, and the most important and part of this peace agreement will be related to this part of Armenia, the part of Armenia between the western, let's say, and the eastern part of Azerbaijan. The sources are saying that the United States of America or Azerbaijan will get access to these territories with the purpose to control this area. This area will be will remain under Armenian control when talking about constitution, but when talking about physical control, this territory could be passed to Azerbaijan or to the United States of America. So, and obviously this is not something that Russia and Iran wants from their side. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously the situation is getting interesting. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.